Hi, Professor Salerno. It's Carolina, and I know you're probably wondering what the hell am I doing, but I think you and I can both agree that papers are exhausting to write and papers are exhausting to grade. So I figured why not try something different, something new. I'm technically doing your final, I'm just presenting it orally rather than in an essay. I'm sorry that this is so, abrupt and last minute, but, you know, having had you as a professor for about 4 or 5 months and having recognized how passionate you are about wanting your students to succeed and how passionate you are about just the topics that you learn, having conversed with you in class and out of class about these things, and how eager you are to see our generation just move forward, I figured I felt comfortable enough to be able to present something like this to you in hopes that you would understand and realize that papers are exhausting and hard. And I'm not trying to sit here and pity myself, but I've had been overwhelmed with so many finals, and instead of just, throwing in the towel and saying, screw writing papers, I figured maybe this could be a way to still, do the final. And whether or not you decide to fail me or pass me on this, at least I can say that I tried something new and pushed myself to do something that is out of the norm, and hopes that you will accept it or understand it or at least try. I decided I wanted to be or pursue a degree in anthropology and sociology because I was always fascinated with how people work, how the world works, how society works. As much as I was leaning more towards anthropology, sociology has definitely offered a window of so many theories and so many ideologies that I can definitely say have stuck with me, and I know will stick with me throughout my academic, activist, and personal life for the rest of my life. For sociology, before I started this class, I really was not sure of any sociologists or social theories, and obviously the recent election had to do so much with what I was feeling and during this class, and how can I apply these social theories to my personal life, to my activist life, and use them to, navigate through such a foggy time within, the world, and how I can use that later on in life since I am pursuing a degree in sociology. So first and foremost, because of my disenchantment and disillusionment with capitalism and just the recent election, this class, as well as other classes that I'm taking at the same time, like my queer theory class, and also just outside of my personal life, I've definitely become more radicalized. And in my queer theory class, we were talking about, accessibility to this information, the fact that I can, take classes on things that I like, take classes and learn so many different things about how societies work and how the systems work is such a privilege, and it's something that is not accessible to everyone. The text, your book that you wrote, and the text, the Lemert book, are such privileges to have and to use, because so many people that, engage in political discussions or want to become politically engaged or, become activists don't have access, don't have the time to read these texts. And so I personally feel really grateful that I was able to actually read Karl Marx, have the time to read that, have the time to go into class and dissect what he was saying, and how the recent election left many people feeling defeated and clueless and lost and without direction. Being able to read Karl Marx's readings on alienation and commodification of the worker definitely inspired me, and not only just because of that, but also because of other classes that I was taking and things I was reading and engaging in my personal life online and outside of class, inspired me and has radicalized me, and it's just made me realize that I used to be such a liberal. I used to, I voted for Hillary Clinton. I was rooting for Bernie Sanders, and I really thought that these people were going to be the answer. They were going to solve these problems. They sounded so persuasive in all their speeches about, and so passionate about wanting to end poverty, wanting to raise a minimum wage, wanting, social justice for people of color, primarily people in Black communities. And you get so inspired and you get so riled up only to just be let down. And definitely something that I learned out of Karl Marx is that and out of your class is that no matter where, if you're liberal or conservative, you still adhere to capitalism. That liberals and conservatives, Democrats and Republicans, although they may differ within views of social justice and things such as like gay marriage, it still adheres to capitalism. And that's definitely one of the things that I took away, and also just applying things from my queer theory class. A reading by Kathy J. Cohen. She mentions how assimilation does not equal liberation, and if there's something that I took out of this class and took out of my classes this semester in general, is that by assimilating into positions of power or structures that capitalism has set up for us, does not mean that we are liberated. It just gives conservatives, it gives the 1%. To laugh at us and be like, look, they think they're free, they think that they have gotten justice, they think this, but in reality we're still adhering to capitalism. A big example would be gay marriage, like I mentioned before. Marriage is an institution and it's a social construct, and it's petrifying that we fought for this equal right, but in reality it's like, are you really your equal? You're trying to assimilate into the structures that the 1% have, and it's just not going to work, because at the end of the day, they know that you're different from them and that you're less than them. And just, I was so angry. I've just felt so angry that they think that through these institutions and through these structures that are just going to settle down and be okay. And that's definitely one thing that I've learned, is that it's not going to be okay. You can't just assimilate and think that you're done, you're set for, whatever. The 1%, or, the upper class, the bourgeois, or whatever you may call it, through false consciousness, implies that these institutions are going to liberate or are going to help the problems or address the problems that people of oppressed groups are experiencing, which is not true, because obviously through false consciousness, the majority of the population, the individual or group that is being oppressed, willfully participates in their own oppression. And whether it's through institutions such as marriage that I mentioned before, education even is an institution where we are willfully participating in our own oppression, because not only are we so confined to, different formats or agendas of, how things should be, how things should turn out, in the end, that's not going to benefit anyone but the system. Having read the works of Karl Marx has also taught me that I am worth more than my productivity. I am not the grade that I may or may not receive on this final. I am not the paycheck that I receive every 2 weeks. I am worth so much more. And that's something that I wish other people would realize. And that's, again, going back to accessibility of this knowledge, is that they are worth more than their productivity. But that's what capitalism sets out, is that we are only machines. We are only here to work for the 1%, to work for the bourgeois. And because of how hard we're working, we get alienated from ourselves, we get alienated from other people, and alienated from things like nature. We are commodified, nature is commodified, and it's so disheartening. And after I learned all this stuff, and one of your prompt questions is, what can you do with this knowledge? I can try my best. I can, first of all, value my self-worth and know that I'm worth more than whatever capitalist beliefs and values are set out, and then whatever capitalist beliefs or values are hegemonized within our society. And I can also use whatever I've learned and tell other people about it, tell my friends about it, tell people that want to get politically engaged about it. Like I mentioned in the beginning of this video, all that I learned in social theory, all that I've at least taken away, which has primarily been the works of Karl Marx, and I am very passionate about activism and wanting to resist, physically, mentally, emotionally, in whatever way that I can, and also be able to engage other people who, they may not be able to just completely give up their social obligations for a rally one day or to protest, but just at least being able to feed them this knowledge and let them know that there are different ways to resist, and that at least having the basis of these ideologies, of these theories by these, notorious theorists is so important. And that's what I want to do with all this knowledge, is be able to pass it on to other people, and also just keep applying it to my everyday life, not only just my activist, but also my academic and my personal life. Another one of Marx's theories that I deeply agreed with was the notion that your work should lead to self-actualization, which is, I agree with 100%. A lot of the times in today's society, in the world that we live in today, especially it's been seen within my generation, people settle for jobs that they're not completely content with, just to be able to pay bills or to get by. And the fact that capitalism sets up for the working class, or just the proletariat, or however you may see it, to only have to work jobs that people are not really happy with just to get by, is absolutely absurd. People should be able to, engage in jobs or engage in work or hobbies that they are truly passionate about, and not have to worry of whether or not they need to pay bills, or whether or not they're going to starve, or whether or not they need a higher education in order to get to where they want to be. I would also like to mention something that I learned in my queer theory class, which is the notion of disidentification, and that is Jose Munoz's idea or ideology, which talks about how you can agree with someone's social theory, in this case, or ideology or idea, or even something as simple as their art, but also understand where they are problematic, where there are gaps within their theories, and understanding that you can still agree with that, but not agree with who they are as a person, or, again, the gaps in their theories. And that is something, again, I would like to relate back to Karl Marx, is that Karl Marx was a sexist and a racist, and I do critique him for there being apparent silences in his work. He didn't mention, again, he was a privileged white male. He, didn't have to think about his race because he was white, and he didn't have to think about, how critical gender was because he was a man. But obviously in today's society, we have realized how critical your race, gender, sexuality or sexual orientation, your able-bodiedness, all of these different intersecting forms of identity, how crucial they are to your perception and your understanding of the world. And I have applied disidentification to Karl Marx's theories because, as much as I agree with his, pieces on the working class and, how work should lead to self-actualization and how people shouldn't be treated as commodities or people shouldn't be alienated, there were gaps and silences in his works. And I think today within the leftist community that I have recently become more engaged with, it's apparent that we have recognized the criticality of, like I mentioned before, intersecting modes of identity, and how we can apply old works of Marx's and, revamp them or reshape them and make them our own, and, realize that although he was privileged, that we could also still use his pieces and use them for our activism and our everyday life. So overall, this class has provided me with an incredible amount of insight that I will undoubtedly use for the rest of my academic career and into my life afterwards. These I mean, while everything that we learned in class was interesting, and a majority of the time it was confusing and I wanted to give up and I wanted to rip my hair out, I feel so mentally liberated. I feel like I can use even little vague parts of some of these theories that we discussed. And obviously, the most important one that stuck with me was, the works of Karl Marx. That I feel like I can use this in order to, analyze a certain political situation that is happening in the world and use it in my everyday life. And for that, like I mentioned before, I feel so grateful to have been able to take a class that has to do with something that is so important to me and something that is just so critical to have used. Like I mentioned before, I want to be able to make these theories more accessible to people that don't have time to go to school or don't have the resources available to them to be able to pick up the Communist Manifesto or Das Kapital and read it, because they have to worry more about whether or not they're going to get their bills paid, whether or not they need to pay rent for the month, or whatever it may be. Just the fact that I have gained a well-rounded understanding of these theories allows me to be able to influence and inspire other people to become engaged in what's happening politically in our society, in our world, and hopefully give them at least a basis to these theories. And all of my life, I've been so adamant and passionate about wanting to help people, and the fact that even just a social theory class could provide me with theories and ideologies that can stretch into my personal life and further allow me to help liberate people and just at least make people aware of their oppression and what's going on around them and pull them up and, into the resistance with me together is incredible. Just, by sitting in your class and reading Limmer and reading your book and learning about these theories, whether or not they have been confusing to understand or to digest, I feel so motivated and I feel so ready to go inspire and make a change. Through being in that class, I have met incredible people who are also just as passionate about making changes and about raising awareness and raising consciousness and not letting our generation just sit by and do nothing while we are living under one of probably like the worst, president cabinets and presidential administrations that have ever existed. Although, like I said, this isn't new, it doesn't give us a reason to just sit by and wait for things to sort themselves out. Through having learned these theories, I feel even more motivated to go out and do change and perform, acts of resistance with people that are just as passionate about it as I am. Only now I have a well-rounded background of knowledge to be able to support the reasonings behind things that I do, and I just hope that I can inspire other people and lift people up with me and make these ideologies more digestible and more accessible to people. So thank you for being so passionate about, your work and what you do, and that is something so refreshing to see. I'm so used to professors that are just kind of like, they don't even bother to remember your names, they don't even care, they just kind of slap grades on things. And the fact that you are so passionate that our generation does something and that we learn, and grasp an understanding of these theories is something so refreshing. And I really, admire you and thank you for that. And I'm not trying to be like, like all kiss up. I don't know. You're probably going to fail me for having turned in my final as a video. And you know what? That's fine. I tried and I pushed myself to do something that was out of the norm. And I'm, not only have I gotten a well-rounded understanding of these theories, but also for my other classes, I've learned that subverting the norm is something that's sometimes necessary. So that's what I'm hoping to push with this final. And yeah, I hope you have a great summer. Again, thank you for this class. Thank you for having taught me. I hope to see you my senior year. Have a great year off. And yeah, thank you for having at least watched this.